Hello everyone. So I'm in a pretty bright room here so you can't see me. But we are now going to continue our 7.2 notes on page 88, and we will be looking at how you multiply and divide these rational expressions. So it's just very similar to multiplying fractions. We want to look for a common factor that we can simplify between the two fractions. And it's going to be very similar in this idea that we will look for a common factor between the numerator and the denominator. The big thing to remember is that when you divide a fraction, you don't actually divide a fraction, you multiply by its reciprocal. So let's go ahead and get started on the factoring. Start with D. My numerator I cannot factor. I'm looking at CF, but I don't see one, and there's nothing I can do with x plus 1. So that's just going to stay the way it is. My denominator, however, does not have a GCF either, but it is a difference of squares, so I can factor that into x plus 2 and x minus 2. So not much work to show for the first fraction. On the second fraction, looking at the denominator, can't factor that at all, so I'll just leave it as x minus 3, and I'm going to go ahead and put this in parentheses as well. Now the numerator I can factor, so I'm looking for factors of 4 that get me to 4, and that's going to be a 2 and a 2. So when I make my parentheses and drop those x's in there, the x and the x will get me the x squared, and now if I just do these loops, x plus 2 can make this 2x, and x plus 2 can make the other 2x. And now what I'm going to do is look for that common factor between the numerator and the denominator. And the reason why I'm able to do this is because if a problem is all multiplying, which just for instance focusing in the numerator, you can rearrange this however you want. So I could technically take this x plus 2 and put it over in this numerator. But as long as it's basically one big continuous fraction like this, you can take out a common factor from the numerator and the denominator. And as it turns out, that's all I can take out. So in my numerator, I'm still left with x plus 1 and an x plus 2. And in my denominator, I'm left with an x minus 2 and an x minus 3. So this has been simplified. Couldn't take very much out. All right, let's jump to E. So starting with my first fraction, right? Make a little x here. I need factors of negative 15. That will get me to 2x. And that would be a 5 with a negative 3. So I'm going to go ahead and start this fraction. So make my parentheses with the x's, and the x's are what I want because x times x is that x squared. And now x times what can make the 5x? Well, that's a positive 5. And x with negative 3 makes the negative 3x. As far as the denominator goes, let's switch to a different color here. Not a lot of room to work. I need factors of negative 4. They get me to negative 3. And that's going to be a negative 4 with a positive 1. So again, go ahead and make those parentheses with the x's. And I like the x's because x times x is that x squared. And then x following a loop here can get me negative 4. And x with a positive 1 can get me this 1x. So that's my first fraction. A lot of factoring here. Let's go ahead and check out this second one. So I'm just going to keep using the space here. I need factors of negative 8 that get me to negative 2, and that would be a negative 4 and a positive 2. So starting that second fraction, make my parentheses, drop those x's in, and I will just keep them x's because x times x is the x squared. And now x times what can make negative 4x, would that be a negative 4, and x times what would make the 2x, and that would be a positive 2. And then as far as the other denominator goes, making that x again, I need factors of 10 that get me to 7, and that's going to be a 2 and a 5. So one more time, making those parentheses, dropping those x's in, and just like all of the others, x and x are fine because x times x makes that x squared. So now x times what can make 2x, and that would be a 2, and x times what can make 5x, and that would be a 5. So now we're going to look and see what can we cancel from our numerator and our denominator. All right, so I'm not seeing an x minus 3 that's common, but I do see x plus 5. I see an x plus 2, and I see an x that is a minus 4. So when I'm done, again, not a lot of room to write in here, I'm left with an x minus 3 in the numerator and an x plus 1 in the denominator. So there is my final answer for E. Let's go ahead and talk about F, just because it has some factoring that I don't think we're as strong at. So the first one, when I look at this numerator, let's draw a little line separating this out, there is a GCF, so I'm going to take that x squared out, and when I do, I'm left with x minus 3. All right? Now, if you want, a good idea with this x squared is to actually break it down into further factors. And x squared just means, I'm going to get rid of that squared, x times x. So just leaving that like that. And then x minus 3 is not a difference of squares. So I'm done factoring this numerator. In this denominator, I can GCF a 4 out. And then I'm left with x minus 2. And x minus 2 is also not a difference of squares. So done with the first fraction. In the second fraction, I'm going to write this up here, I can GCF a 6 out. And when I do that, I'm left with x squared minus 4. This is a difference of squared. So joining the 6, I can factor this one further into x plus 2 and x minus 2. And in the denominator, I have a GCF of x, so I'm going to take that x out, and then I'm left with x plus 1, and that's not a difference of squares either. So as far as this fraction goes, I'm ready to start my crossing off for the common factors. So I have an x minus 2 on top and x minus 2 on the bottom. I also have a single x in the bottom, so I'll take out one of these single x's in the top. And then even 6 and 4, we might forget about those, but between these, 6 and 4, I could, factor out a 2, so I'm left with a 3 here and a 2 there. So when I'm done in my numerator, I still have an x minus 3, an x plus 2, and a 3. So I'm going to write it like this. And in my denominator, I'm left with a 2 and an x plus 1. Whoops, sorry, you can't see that. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the video for this portion, and that's going to cover the multiplying. I will have a quick short video for the dividing, but it's going to be just like this. Just remember, when you divide by a fraction, we're going to end up multiplying by this one's reciprocal. So we're just going to flip it. So we'll do that in the next video.